thanks for joining. I'm Sean Adler and host of the Blue Swan podcast, and we are very, very lucky today to have Tim Storms, who's an actor, stuntman, and stunt coordinator with a list of credits that are unreal. And so, with that in mind, would you mind introducing yourself, your passions, what drive you, and anything else you want people to know?
Hi, Tim Storms. I'm originally from Minnesota. I grew up I've always been in action. I started doing gymnastics when I was 4 years old. I started martial arts when I was 12, and I got my degree in classical and musical theater. So I did a lot of Shakespearean theater. So a lot of stage fighting, a lot of stage training, and that kind of led me to, pursue the more of the action stuff here in Hollywood.
And so, in 2005, 20 years prior, you were nominated for a Taurus World Stunt Award.
Actually, I was nominated for Logan as well. On Spider-Man 2, I did a lot of, as well as training Tobey Maguire to do what he had to do. I played a surgeon in the surgery scene where they're trying to fix Doc Ock. So I did a whole bunch of wire work and things that are called ratchets. So we're on a wire, high speed pneumatic, throwing us through the air, spinning and crashing and smashing things and through doors and things like that. So I worked on that for about 3 weeks of testing a lot of different ratchets and stunts for other performers as well. So I was pretty beat up after that process, but it was really fun. And then we got into filming, and I got to shoot opposite Alfred Molina, who played Doc Ock. And that was just a dream come true to be doing stunts and acting opposite him. And I actually made it to the end of that scene. Sam Raimi, brilliant as he is, he did an homage to his zombie Night of the Living Dead and stuff like that. So we have a chainsaw in the operating room, and I am the saw doctor. So I grab that to defend myself, and I try to fight against the tentacles, but I'm to no avail. I'm wiped out at the end. And
It was well put together, and you could see the emotion on all of the actors. And so it was pretty intense. Speaking of Spider-Man, you did the stunt training for Tobey Maguire, right?
yes,
Okay. And you have a unique mix of both martial arts and gymnastics. And so that translates really well to characters like Spider-Man. Is there any chance you'd be happy to talk about some of the training methodology and what you went through?
the first thing is working on strength, flexibility, and coordination, which is the key to all movement, basically. Gymnastics and martial arts and dance and all sports like that are very similar, because the more strengths you can have in flexibility, the more extended your shoulders can be, the longer your legs can be, the more forces you can generate, and the more rotations you can generate, et cetera, et cetera. So that really came in handy. Plus, I'd been a dancer as well. So a lot of my background, I was able to use both the physical conditioning of those specific art forms, plus the movements themselves. When it comes to wire work, I worked on the original Matrix and taught, especially Lawrence Fishburne, but all of them, how to do their wire work and some of the gymnastics stuff, especially the dojo fight. And it occurred to I got to work with some really amazing Wushu coordinators and choreographers, but they couldn't really translate to the Americans on the Matrix what they wanted specifically. So I got to step in and physically point out things that they should be doing. And I knew that, instinctively how it would work, because I'd been spotting people in gymnastics for years, training people in martial arts for years, and it just naturally translates, because a body in motion will always tend to do certain things, and I could predict those things. And it's a very physics oriented, both of those, kind of movement styles. So you know what the limitations are of people, and you know what the progress can actually be. So it works out really nicely.
Speaking of bodies in motion, you have done some really incredible movements in a couple of your action reels where you've pulled a bow and arrow at the peak of an aerial cartwheel inverted and then done combination movements where you're landing a downward elbow and a front flip. You did some stunt performance in the video game God of War. And so those movements are practically godlike. If you're willing, I'm sure everybody would love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
It was at the very beginning of when mocap or motion capture really started to be used. Play a lot of different characters and different styles of movement in that. And I always like to incorporate things from my background, whether it's gymnastics or wushu or kicks and punches and things that, or dance that I know are going to work in a motion style. And that was incredible because, you know, I got to play secondary characters to Kratos and, you know, do a lot of fighting against Kratos and teach him, you know, his movements with his axe and things like that. So it was really, really fun to discover those things. It was really new at the time, but I think we got a lot of good stuff out of it. It was fun.
Thanks. And then, so how does your background in Taekwondo and Wushu specifically, which you have black belts in for both, affect sort of the way you've trained people for any kind of stunt performance, anything you've done in motion capture?
I still train people to this day. I like to, like I said, both gymnastics and wushu have incomparable physical training attached to it. You can't do the things that are expected in either of those without a huge amount of physical training that's attached to it, weightlifting, and you can get by in a lot of other sports without sport specific training. But in wushu and gymnastics, it's way beyond that. You have to have enormous amounts of strength, enormous amounts of flexibility, coordination, plyometrics, things like that. So it's, you know, they're even still just discovering training methodologies, and especially coming from where I come from in those backgrounds, the Chinese and the Russians, especially the Chinese, have developed training systems way beyond what America was ever able to do to start off with. We've adapted a lot of that, and we've actually expounded on that with scientific, you know, experimentation and verification and codification. But the Russians were able to, especially during the Cold War and things like that.
Some of the developments may be a little bit more in the future, but speaking of things being futuristic, you also doubled for Picard in Star Trek, right?
Yes. Yeah. Specifically Star Trek Picard for 3 seasons. Patrick Stewart. Yeah.
Awesome. Is there a chance you would let us know a little bit about that?
That was a dream come true for me. Like I said, I have my degree in classical and Shakespearean theater, and seeing Patrick Stewart in Excalibur, of first thing that I'd seen. And I'd heard about him through Shakespearean studies, but finally being able to meet him was just amazing. And my first movie that I worked on, Robin Hood Men in Tights, I got to meet him and I got to work with him, but I didn't double him. I was playing a merry man. So I got to be next to him and work on the same movie. But then years later down the road, after I'd lost my hair and, you know, I got a little older, I became his stunt double. I can't remember what show, Blunt Talk. It was a British comedy. And then we did Logan together. And then we did 3 seasons of Star Trek, which was amazing. I'd never worked on a show for that long before, it's kind of different for a stunt man. I was there every single day that he was, and a lot of days that he wasn't. I was in his costume, ready to go every single day. So I actually got the opportunity to be next to him all the time and study his movements. So I had him down pretty precisely, and all the cameramen would say, wow, you can't tell the difference between your movements and his. And so they would shoot a lot of his footage right over my shoulder and you couldn't tell the difference. So
No, they definitely utilized a lot of the implied formality of a British accent in the X-Men movies with both Professor X and Magneto. And so Elon Musk has more of a South African accent, but he did appear as a cameo in Young Sheldon, of which you've also performed in. And
yes,
so is there any chance you could share a little bit about that?
Young Sheldon was, I got to do a few episodes of that. We did one really crazy episode where there's it's a Halloween special. There's a haunted house and they bring a whole bunch of kids to see this haunted house and it's televised and everything goes wrong. So people are getting their throats cut. There's blood gushing out of people's necks. It's just gory. And while we're performing that fight scene, I'm slipping all over the ground and having to throw punches. And there's so much blood on the ground. It was like wrangling a greased pig, basically, trying to fight in that way. I've done a few different fight scenes on there. And I also got to train one of my favorite actors. He plays Vicini in The Princess Bride. So I got to train him to do Tai Chi, which was pretty cool for me because, that brings it full circle. Like you were talking about before, I get to bring aspects of my training into filming sometimes when I don't expect it. The same thing on Picard. There were some training scenes where they were supposed to be doing like Tai Chi or martial arts, but it was supposed to be alien. So I got to adapt things to alien type movements. And the same thing with the young Sheldon. I got to bring my Tai Chi on board and teach him how to do that, which was really, really cool for me.
And so, speaking of the holiday spirit in terms of Halloween and sort of blood flying everywhere, some people have talked about sort of like being on the set of movies like The Protector and, like Tony Jaa kicks the moon and then all they want for Christmas are their two front teeth. And so there's almost a double standard where it's like, if you touch an actor, it's bad news, but then it's like if an actor may accidentally knock your teeth out, it's never intended, it's not supposed to occur, but when it does, like what kind of precautions are generally on set for performers and sort of how does that roll?
We, especially here in I've worked in China and India also, and it definitely is a different standard when it comes to fighting, and you're much more replaceable if you get hit or if you can't even perform the fight scene the right way. It's next guy is up. But here in America, safety is definitely the standard, and we really tried to build it in to the rehearsal period and make sure that we have ample rehearsal time and space to do what we need to do. Having said that, I have been cracked and hit and kicked and injured due to an actor getting out of control or even another stunt person not following the protocols or just getting too excited about what's going on. And I really, first of all, we have a stunt coordinator that's supposed to be monitoring all of that. And there's a wide range of abilities, some incredible stunt coordinators who really focus on safety, but others, that's not their priority as much. It's getting a great shot. But it's also, as a stunt person, I know that my job is, and I know what my pain tolerances are too. I know I can take those things and go on with the show. I've been split open, bleeding, and I personally, and I tell other people this, I don't want the actor to react and go, "Oh, I'm so sorry," because I've seen it in a couple of clips recently where this actress slaps Jackie Chan, and she was supposed to do it, but she hit him too hard, and she goes, "Oh no, I'm so sorry," and he goes, "You just ruined my shot," and that's my perspective too. I don't want to get hit. I don't want to get hurt, and I do everything that I can to protect myself. But if it happens, I want the crew to continue on with their job and get it on film so we have the shot. And then I can be dealt with and I can deal with the pain afterwards. So that's part of the gig. You have to know you got to tough it out sometimes. On Spider-Man 2, those ratchets that I was talking about, I get picked up by the head by Doc Ock with the claw and thrown across the room in like 5 different directions. And we'd never done this type of stunt before, where normally with a ratchet, you stand on the ground, you brace yourself, you know what's coming, and you go with the flow when it happens. But the way we did this one, and this was a first on film, they picked me up on another line first. So I was suspended. So I had nothing to brace against. I was swinging free in the wind. And then they fired the ratchet, which was over my shoulder, and I twisted and I went flying. And I was actually able to do that in the rehearsals. We rehearsed this, like I said, for 3 weeks. We did it again and again and again, and I got it because my gymnastics training allowed me to know how I wanted to go with that. But on the day of filming, at the last minute, we had 15 minutes to go beforehand. The camera guy said, "Oh, we lit this back part over here, so we want you to fly the other direction." That changed the dynamics of what I was doing completely, because instead of going over this shoulder, which I was used to, they put that ratchet over this shoulder. So the wire was going this way, which twisted me completely the opposite direction. So we get up there and I'm acting and I'm struggling. In the process of that, they fired it. I went flying and I smashed, and they said, "Okay, good." And we always go again. It's never going to be perfect, but I had realized that my arm had gone numb. I didn't know what was happening. It's like, did I hit it on the ground when I landed? What happened? And then I looked at the playback on a video monitor, and you can see that in slow motion, my arm was completely ripped out of the socket and dislocated, and then it popped back in. And it just killed the nerve right there. And I went, "Oh, I need about 5 minutes." So they gave me 5 minutes graciously. It was really nice. And then they said, "Okay, let's do it again." Same thing. 8 times in a row, I went through that, and 8 times in a row, my arm dislocated and I pulled it back in because they wanted my arm way out here and stretched out. And so I got to suffer through that quite a few times. That's it. Sometimes it just takes sucking it up and, powering through. And luckily, like in Chinese martial arts, they say you have to learn how to eat bitter. And that's that philosophy of suffering that we're talking about. I went through that with gymnastics and martial arts. I try to be as gracious as possible and make sure that they know exactly what they did wrong, but it wasn't their fault, because extenuating circumstances always come into play. It's always much more exciting on set. There's a light in your face. There are 20 people standing around you. The floor is more slippery than you thought. You have different wardrobe on. So there's always extenuating circumstances. And you have to, an actor, a lot of times, they're not going to take all those factors into account because they just don't know what they don't know yet. So usually their excitement and energy adds to the fight scene, but it can get out of control. And a lot of times that's my job, is to make sure that it stays safe and that I'm still acting like I'm getting hurt when I'm not actually getting hurt.
And so back in 2003, you did stunt training for Bulletproof Monk. How is that different from some of the fighting that you helped train in The Matrix and in Spider-Man?
I went back to like The Matrix and my Hong Kong training and Wushu, and they worked very differently in Hong Kong. And I knew that was expected from the director and the fight choreographer. And they work a lot tighter and they rehearse things a lot more. So I was working specifically with Sean William Scott and Jamie King, training them on, and initially they had just said, get them in shape and, get them strong and get them flexible. which is a whole different ball of wax. So I took it upon myself to start teaching them Wushu weapons and wire work and gymnastics and everything that I knew that they would need, and how to, sell punches working in a really, really tight distance. In American cinematography and films, we work 6 to 12 inches away from another actor. And if you get closer than that, you're in trouble. In Hong Kong choreography, you'll see, punches swinging 2 to 3 inches even closer to somebody's face or body. And they work a lot tighter because they work on that constantly. So we worked every single day for, months, just working through all those aspects of movie fighting, of different types of styles of martial arts, of wire work, of gymnastics. So I wanted to give them a very thorough knowledge. And I think it worked. It shows because they did so much of their own movement in the movie. And it worked great. Mission accomplished on my part, at least.
The character defines the movement. And so, John Wick does gun fu, BJJ, judo, but Captain America will flip over in the air and do a scissors kick. And they're very different characters.
Yes.
Speaking of the, judo gun fu type, would you mind talking about your work in The Accountant 2 briefly?
That was another thrilling film. I got to double J.K. Simmons. It's not that he's trained in gun fu or anything like that, but he's desperate. And I got to work with some great choreographers, and the action choreographer, Fernando Chen, is actually an old student and friend of mine, that training partner that we had a team together years and years ago. So he knew my skills, and it was neat to get back to that style with somebody that was familiar. And J.K. Simmons actually is really, really a good study when it comes to, figuring out movement and the acting beats. When it comes to fights like that, the acting is how the character reacts is so much more important than any of the moves that you come up with. And so we did really great pre-visualization. So we put together this whole big bathroom scene with cardboard boxes, and we worked through things and we figured out. And, it's just step by step. The choreographer has an idea in their mind how they want it to go. But as you get together as a group, as the stunt team is working together, it's, you hope that you're open to the ideas of, hey, wouldn't this work for this? And this feels more comfortable for me to do this instead of taking the gun here this way, maybe I just redirect it, and or things like that. And it's a lot of discovery. It's a lot like acting too. You work together with your fellow actors or your stunt people, and you figure out, what works for everybody and what's the most dynamic. So it's JK really, really stepped up, and he was in that bathroom fighting as hard as I was a lot of the time. So it was, I took the big slams for him, but he was there. We worked for several nights putting that together, and filming it. And he was just a trooper. And I doubled him before on a few things. We had a good relationship working together. He knew that I could handle whatever action he didn't want to do. And he's a egoless actor when it comes to stepping in and saying, I don't want to do that part. I want you to do that, Tim. Take that over for me and do this fall or do this, this movement, whatever it is. And some actors aren't that way. I've been lucky to have a lot of good actors that once they realize that they don't want to do all the stunts or the hits or even all the movement, then it makes both of our jobs a lot easier. it takes the burden off, because then they can really focus on the acting part of it.
You hear it a lot from people who truly love their art. You know, like they may have had more fun on the set of something like, you know, Robin Hood Men in Tights than they did on X-Men, in spite of X-Men being like much, much larger, more commercialized production. Thanks. So I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and to share the Bohemian Rhapsody of the entertainment industry.
Certainly.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Anytime. Thanks for
It's been a
coming.
pleasure.
Thanks.